Every time you click an icon, drag a window, or use a mouse, you are using technology that was invented and perfected by one company. That company was not Apple. It was not Microsoft. It was a company famous for making paper copies. A company that built the blueprint for the modern digital world, and then let it all slip away. This is the story of the greatest missed opportunity in business history. In the 1970s, Xerox was a titan. It wasn't just a company, it was a verb. To Xerox, something meant to make a copy. Their grip on the office technology market was absolute. They were a monopoly in every sense of the word, protected by a fortress of patents. But Xerox leadership was not complacent. They saw a threat on the horizon. A radical idea called the paperless office. They knew that one day, computers would threaten their dominance. So, they decided to invent that future themselves, before anyone else could. In 1970, they established a research center in Palo Alto, California, with a singular mission: design the office of the future. They called it PARC. They hired the brightest minds in computer science and gave them a blank check. The results were staggering. The engineers at PARC didn't just predict the future, they built it. They created the world's first true personal computer. They invented the graphical user interface with its windows, icons, and pop-up menus. They invented the mouse. They invented Ethernet networking, allowing computers to communicate with each other. They invented the laser printer. They held the keys to a multi-trillion-dollar revolution. Yet, when the personal computer boom happened, Xerox was nowhere to be seen. So how did a corporate giant, with a team of certified geniuses and a head start of nearly a decade, fumble the future it single-handedly invented? That is the question we are answering today. The first part of the answer lies in the very structure of Xerox. The company's headquarters were in Stamford, Connecticut, 3,000 miles away from their new research lab in California. This distance was both physical and psychological. PARC was a skunkworks project on an epic scale. Researchers were completely insulated from the corporate bureaucracy of the main company. They had no deadlines, no product roadmaps, and no pressure to generate profit. Their only job was to dream. And dream they did. By 1973, they had created the Xerox Alto. It is impossible to overstate how revolutionary this machine was. It was the first computer designed to be used by a single person. It had a high-resolution screen that displayed black text on a white background, just like a piece of paper. It had a graphical user interface, or GUI. Instead of typing complex commands, you could interact with the computer using a strange, three-button device they called a mouse. You could open multiple windows at once, create documents in a word processor, draw illustrations, and send emails to other Alto users on the world's first Ethernet network. It was, for all intents and purposes, the first modern PC. The researchers at PARC knew they had lightning in a bottle. They built hundreds of Altos and used them to run the facility. They were living in the 21st century, while the rest of the world was still in the 1970s. The problem was, almost no one outside of their building knew it. The executives back on the East Coast were what you might call copier men. Their world was one of steel, toner, and paper. Xerox didn't sell machines. They leased them for thousands of dollars a month and made fortunes selling the consumables. It was a brilliant, high-margin business model they understood perfectly. When they saw the Alto, they didn't see a revolution. They saw a tool. A very, very expensive one. Their market research concluded that a personal computer was a niche product with a tiny addressable market. They calculated that to be profitable, an Alto would need to sell for around $18,000. Who would pay that for a personal office machine? They couldn't grasp the concept of a personal computer. Their entire worldview was B2B, business to business. They saw a machine that might help a secretary type faster, not a device that would one day be in every home, used by every person. The inventions from PARC were a direct threat to their core identity. A graphical user interface and powerful word processors promised a world with less paper. Ethernet promised a world where information was shared digitally, not by walking a memo over to the copier. Xerox did attempt to launch a commercial product based on PARC technology, the Xerox Star, in 1981. It was a technological marvel, but a commercial disaster. It was slow, priced at over $16,000, and marketed poorly. The sales team, accustomed to leasing massive copiers to corporate clients, had no idea how to sell this new category of device. The company was trying to sell the future, using the playbook of the past. While Xerox executives were paralyzed by indecision, others were paying attention. A young entrepreneur named Steve Jobs was leading a small but ambitious company called Apple. In 1979, Xerox's own venture capital arm made a strategic investment in Apple, buying 100,000 shares for $1 million. As part of that deal, Jobs and his team of engineers negotiated a tour of the top-secret PARC facility. Xerox agreed, giving them 2 demonstrations in exchange for the right to buy pre-IPO Apple stock. It would be both the best and worst deal Xerox ever made. What Jobs saw that day changed him forever. He saw the Alto, the graphical interface, and object-oriented programming. The Xerox executives who approved the tour saw these things as interesting curiosities. Jobs saw them as the future of humanity. He famously paced around the room, shouting at the PARC engineers, "You're sitting on a gold mine. Why aren't you doing anything with this? This is revolutionary." The PARC researchers had invented the ingredients. But Steve Jobs saw the recipe. He immediately understood that the key was not the technology itself, but making it accessible and affordable for ordinary people. Apple's engineers returned from the visit and immediately began work on a new computer, the Lisa. It would incorporate the core ideas of the GUI and the mouse. The Lisa was a commercial failure, but it laid the groundwork for its successor, the 1984 Macintosh. The Mac, and later Microsoft's Windows, would go on to define the personal computer revolution. A revolution started, funded, and invented by Xerox. So why did Xerox fail? It wasn't a failure of technology. It wasn't a failure of talent. And it wasn't a failure of funding. It was a catastrophic failure of vision. A failure of corporate culture. The Xerox business model was so successful, so profitable, and so deeply embedded in the company's DNA that it blinded them to the very future they had created. They were in the business of putting information on paper. The personal computer was about taking information off paper and putting it onto a screen. It was an existential threat to their identity. And that's the secret. The fatal flaw. Xerox didn't fail because it couldn't innovate. It failed because its existing success made it impossible to embrace disruptive innovation. The culture was optimized to sell and service complex, expensive machines to large corporations. A small, simple, personal device was a foreign language they could not speak. They couldn't see the billion-dollar forest because they were too busy counting the pennies from their multimillion-dollar trees. They invented the car, but they were a company that sold horses. And they couldn't imagine a world without them. If this piece of hidden business history gave you an aha moment, take a second to click that subscribe button. You'll help us continue to unlock stories of strategies that won, and those that failed. The story of Xerox and PARC is now a legendary case study taught in business schools. It's the ultimate example of the innovator's dilemma. This is the principle where successful, well-managed companies often fail because the very practices that made them successful also prevent them from developing the disruptive technologies that will ultimately unseat them. Xerox listened to its customers. Its customers wanted better, faster, and cheaper copiers. They weren't asking for personal computers because they didn't know such a thing could even exist. The lesson is that true innovation isn't just about creating a new product in a lab. It's about having the organizational courage and strategic vision to build a new business model around it, even if it threatens your current cash cow. Companies like Kodak, Blockbuster, and Nokia would later learn this same painful lesson. They prove that in business, you can do everything right, and still lose if you are fighting yesterday's war. If you learn something new, hit the like button and subscribe for more strategy breakdowns. And let us know in the comments, What company's strategy should we unlock next?